Good morning, everyone. My name is Chelsea. I'm from the Desert Research Institute, and I'll be your host for today's workshop, The Art of Science. I want to thank everyone for coming, and we are especially excited to have our presenter here today. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to remind everyone of the timeline. This workshop runs from 11 to 11:50. So we will have some time for Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, write them in the chat, and we will be sure to have those answered or addressed. So I will do our introduction. I would like to introduce our speaker today, Tiffany Pereira. Tiffany Pereira is an assistant research scientist, field biologist, range ecologist at the Desert Research Institute. Tiffany is a field biologist and scientific illustrator specializing in the flora and fauna of the desert Southwest. For the last 8 years, she has worked as a wildlife biologist and botanist in the Mojave and Great Basin deserts. Her master's thesis research focused on seed ecology and germination, as well as evaluating long-term change in soil seed banks, fertile islands, and plant communities of conservation priority gypsum rare plant habitat of the Eastern Mojave. Currently, her work involves conducting research and providing guidance on natural resource management in Nevada. As both a researcher and an artist, she is also interested in graphic design and illustration for science communication. She provides these services to DRI and has completed commissions for the Nevada State Museum, Las Vegas, publications, and private entities. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thank you all for being here on a Saturday morning. Hopefully, you'll take something away from this, and yeah, I'm just happy to be here. So let's dive right on in. So, title of this presentation is called The Art of Science, a scientific illustration for science communication. Now, a key issue that scientists face today is communication. Some people don't have access to the right information. Some people don't know where to look, and others simply don't care unless it affects them directly. So as scientists, as researchers, how do we confront this issue and present our scientific data in a way that's informative, effective, and that actually reaches a broad audience? And as a solution to this problem, I assert that art and science don't have to exist on separate planes, polarized by separate processes. Art can be a powerful medium that can convey scientific fact in a way that's informative and that people actually want to engage. And the quote here from the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators: "As art reflects culture, scientific illustration reflects the findings of science and technology. It takes the viewer from what's an abstract concept to something that's depicted that they can actually see and engage with." Now, scientific illustration as a genre is not new by any means. Back in the day, explorers and researchers didn't have fancy cameras, graphic software, and computers to document their findings. They had to rely on artwork and meticulously hand-drawn illustrations to not only share their work and preserve it, but to also share it with others to advance the fields. You can see here, there's a 16th century Byzantine illustrated manuscript, one of the earlier floral or botanical illustrations. And so scientific illustration is actually deeply entwined with scientific discovery and progress, and it paved the foundation of modern research because a lot of the scientists like Charles Darwin, John James Audubon, they had to be scientists and artists themselves, and the way they shared those phenomenal and groundbreaking discoveries is by illustrating them. There you can see Darwin's famous finches. He illustrated that himself and shared that around the world so that people could build upon those discoveries. So the golden age of scientific illustration was one that sparked curiosity, exploration, and there was interaction with the public. So the public for the first time was actually getting to engage with those scientific discoveries, and that came in the form of illustration. And as an example of that, here we have an illustration of the Tasmanian tiger. It's the largest meat-eating marsupial, and it actually went extinct in 1936. And what you're seeing here is an illustration that was drawn from life, one of the last ones before this creature went extinct. And there are some pictures. There is some short footage of the Tasmanian tiger, but it's in black and white. So this illustration really is the only image that we have that captures and brings this mammal to life, or marsupial, excuse me, to life. And we unfortunately don't have anything else to remember them by. But that was in the past. Today, in the modern age, we have computers, we have the internet, we have a whole host of technology that helps us engage with the world, engage with science and research. And increasingly, Americans are turning to social media as one of their primary sources for science news. Unfortunately, with these advances in technology and the great things that come with it, we also get a lot of misinformation, and it's hard for people to discern between the facts and between the fake. And a lot of times we get scientific outlets that are sharing scientific information, but it might not be correct or it might not be the most current. And as researchers, how can we utilize these tools to be able to present the facts and the data in the right way? Because people are engaging, but they want to learn, they just might not know where to look. And so art can help bridge this gap between the echo chambers where scientific content tends to stay within researchers and the journals, and actually bring those data, those new discoveries, those advances in technology to people, to your everyday folks and students that just want to learn. And as a way of conveying that information, art is a form of communication that everyone can relate to in some way. As the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Why would someone want to read an abstract, a giant block of text that's usually full of jargon at the beginning of a manuscript, when you can have a graphical abstract visually depict the same thing in an accessible way? So I've embraced this. As Chelsea said, I am an artist as well as a researcher. And so I bring scientific illustration to my research as well. So I deal more recently with a lot of botanical research. And botanical illustration is something that has been used forever. And botanists still use those illustrations today. So I've illustrated, you can see our threatened and endangered plants of ash meadows in Nevada. I do a lot of seed work and germination work, so creating guides for identifying seedlings at that stage. And scientific illustration doesn't, and we'll get into this more, but doesn't just have to be line drawings. Increasingly, alternative forms of creative outlets and visualizations, such as stacked photography that you can see here. These were taken under a microscope at different depth levels and then compressed together to depict a different form of scientific illustration now with today's technology. But scientists can't all be artists, and you don't have to be Picasso or Monet to have your work depicted visually. There's a rich history of collaboration between scientists and artists. Otherwise, you can end up with this. This is a real figure from a real journal, from a real paper, and is one of my favorites. I love it. I've actually seen this printed on shirts. It's kind of a thing in the community, because they made some interesting choices here artistically, but they did their best to visually demonstrate their findings. And visual choices aside, it conveys what they were trying to say. But if you don't want your figure looking like this, you can collaborate with the scientific illustrator. And so I do work with a lot of different researchers who are like, hey, I have this idea, I have these data, how can I bring it to life? And that's where I come in. I take their work. Here you can see this is work done on amphibians and the chytrid fungus that's actually causing their own panzootic, it's called, not a pandemic, panzootic for for animal species, but it's a fungus that's causing a extinction event and a crisis around the world for amphibians. So depicted some of the findings for that work. And then also working with researchers around the world. This is work from a researcher in Perth, Australia. He actually found me through Twitter and saw what I did and was like, hey, I have an idea. We did this work on the effects of rodenticide and its impacts up through the food chain. So I hand drew the species involved in that research and produced the graphical abstract that you see here. So that collaborative effort is ongoing, and it's something that journals are increasingly asking for and sometimes even requiring as part of a way to, when researchers are applying to publish their research. And what's great about this is you can take that, post it to social media, and people can engage with that artwork rather than trying to download the journal article, read a block of text that is full of jargon. So as another place where scientific illustration has actually never left would be museums. So this is the painting that myself and my colleague at the time did for the Nevada State Museum here in Las Vegas. It's a 2x4 foot oil painting. And we're gonna play a video about kind of the process, the illustrative process of creating the scientific illustration that you see here. And if you have questions that come up during the video or of anything I've gone through so far, throw it in the chat and we'll get to those right after.
Welcome to the Nevada State Museum, Las Vegas, here on the campus of the Springs Preserve. Our mission is to educate, but also to inspire a really diverse audience about the wonderful history of this state. We are a natural history and history museum, and we will take you on a journey when you enter into our galleries, a journey that will take you 250 million years. Part of that exhibit we're going to show you here today and how it's so important as part of that journey. For we see more than 7,000 fourth graders from Clark County School District every year as they study Nevada history in their curriculum. This is a really important place for them to learn in a different way outside of the classroom environment. And that's why this museum is so important to those children. And so is this exhibit that you're going to see.
So as a scientific illustrator and a scientist, one of the most exciting things is getting to work with other experts in their fields. And I'm here today with one of my friends and a curator of natural history here at the museum, Sally Underwood.
Thank you, Tiffany. So this is one of at least my second exhibit that I did once I started here in 2012. And the whole reason why I wanted to do this was because we had this very important piece the femur of a dromaeosaur dinosaur, which is one of the first dinosaurs found in southern Nevada. And frankly, it looked like just a stick. And so knowing how important these specimens were, I wanted to make this more of a dynamic, interactive exhibit that children could enjoy because they love dinosaurs, but also express the importance of these specimens.
So the artistic process of creating a scientific illustration is different from creating just a street mural or any kind of typical work of art that you might see in a art museum, because you have to work with the experts in their field and with the client who's requesting the painting. So in this case, I had to work very closely with Sally Underwood and her colleagues, and they actually gave us a prompt which turned into the painting that you see here today. But that prompt took very many steps. So we're gonna talk through those steps right now.
Yeah. So one of the first things we know from the actual scientific data is that where these fossils were found was a floodplain. So it's not like everybody was articulated and put together in one piece and we had a whole individual. Mm-hmm. We had little bitsy parts that sometimes matched and sometimes didn't. And that's how they could infer that there was a floodplain, that a flood event happened, and that it was a quick death and preserved right away.
Right. So when they told us that, we immediately were thinking, okay, we're trying to showcase a floodplain, but we're also trying to showcase how this dromaeosaur might have unfortunately perished to give us the fossil that's on display here. So digging through my own archives, I was able to find some of the original sketches that look very different from the finished piece. So when they said floodplain, we assumed, okay, we're gonna show the full floodplain in the background and then maybe have some dromaeosaurs fighting. You can see our little sketch over here. Maybe some dromaeosaurs fighting in the foreground to give an indication of maybe they beat each other up. However, when we brought this back to the museum, that's not exactly what they had in mind.
Yes, so Dr. Steve Rowland from UNLV, he's a paleontologist, he was our advisor on this project. And he corrected the floodplain to be almost like more of a flood stream. You know, a flash flood kind of happening and catching, you know, animals by surprise and doing their normal daily things. And we wanted it to be very dynamic, you know, catching the animals by surprise. And Tiffany and her colleague came up with a great idea of the crocodiliomorph.
After that initial critique, in the art world, we call that a formal critique, the museum gave us. So we had to go back to the drawing board and rethink our approach to this. What they indicated is that they really wanted a snapshot in time that showcased when the rains came through, these animals are doing their thing, and it's really come alive. So with that feedback in mind, it was back to the drawing board, and we decided to zoom in on the action as opposed to that far out view that you saw last time. And in doing so, that allowed us to showcase some of the flora, the plants that would have been there at the time. And some of these, like the magnolia and the horsetail species, are actually still present and alive today. And what's special is that we also got to work from the fossilized specimens of these plant species to relate back to our drawings, which you don't get to do very often as an artist. So she's holding the magnolia, and then they also have the horsetails as well as many other ferns and cycads that we got to showcase here in the drawing. The other part that came out of that critique was needing more fauna. So the museum staff really wanted to showcase the other animals, the other dinosaurs that would have been around at that same time. We did have our crocodilian, which thankfully we don't have crocodilians of this size that exist anymore for everyone's sake. But we chose him to be the one that would lead to the demise of our dromaeosaur right here. But Sally, what other critters did you want us to include?
So we have evidence also of some of the armored dinosaurs. And so that would be the ankylosaur and the stegosaurus. And we also had evidence of the iguanodon. And we had this fun thought that maybe we should make it more of a hide and seek. So the more you stared at the painting, the more critters you discovered. And that turned out really well because Tiffany and her colleague were able to add everything that we have evidence for, including the titanosaur, which is a big, huge sauropod, or brontosaurus. That's what I learned. And so it made it really kind of fun to look at this for a long time.
So once Sally and the museum approved that final sketch, we were ready to add color and we were ready to get painting, which is really the most exciting part of the process, but it's a long part of the process. It took over 80 hours for my colleague and I to create this painting that you see behind me. We had to consider color, we had to consider light, we had to consider movement, and all these things combined is what helps bring this painting to life, which is really the heart of what the museum wanted from us. So when it was all said and done, we brought the painting, the 2x4 foot panel, back to the museum, but they had one final critique in store for us. Sally?
Yes, dromaeosaur dinosaurs are really famous for their feathers. They actually have bony knobs in their forearms that we know were indicators of long, significant feathers. And so we had to ask for feathers for the dromaeosaurs.
Yep. So with that, we actually had to turn around, take the painting back home, and add feathers on the dromaeosaurs. When you see Jurassic Park, dromaeosaurs are actually related to velociraptors, related to Utahraptors, but they don't get the feathers in that movie. But when you're working for a museum creating a scientific illustration, you have to make sure that you get those details right. So we added the feathers and we brought the painting back to the museum. And what did you guys think?
We loved it. You guys did what we asked for, representing all the flora and fauna, and you did it in such a dynamic manner that it's such a fun picture to look at. I constantly am looking at it. And Tiffany was also instrumental in helping us with our information wheel here for the children to try and learn the different types of species here, our specimens here. And she gave us more information about the plants so that we could make it fun. And I really, really appreciate working with you.
And as an artist, you don't really get to work with experts in their field like Sally. So it was a fantastic opportunity to work with Sally, to work with the museum, to really bring something to life that would be educational for those that come see it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see some messages in the chat. I'll talk about those real quick. But yeah, it really is. I just see a comment about kind of like a additional things to find, like hide and seek kind of thing. And that is really what they were going for. In fact, it's not in the video, but as part of the add the feathers critique, Dr. Steve Rowland actually he really liked turtles. And there were turtles at the time. and they actually haven't changed that much since then. But we had added turtles for him, and he was like, needs more turtles. So he had us put more turtles. I actually don't know how many turtles are in that painting. So it's a fun thing when they do tours, they'll have people try and count how many turtles are in the painting and see what you can find. And I think it really did turn out well. The formal title of the painting is called A Floodplain Comes to Life. Or no, it's called The Morning After the Storm, a Cretaceous Floodplain Comes to Life. Sorry about that. Yes, so that's the formal title, and that indicates that coming to life that they were trying to convey. Share my screen again here. So again, you can see the feathers that we had to add on the forearms and on the tail and on the crest of the head, and all the turtles that are in there for them. So this painting is still at the Nevada State Museum here in Las Vegas. The State Museum is right next to the Springs Preserve. It's the same complex, but they are two different entities. So feel free to go check it out. And now you have the insider scoop on how that was created. So for the next part of this, it's going to be a little more interactive. Again, feel free to throw questions in the chat, and we'll pause and get to those as we go along. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to bring scientific illustration, science communication to your students and also for you. So the first thing, as we just discussed with working with a museum, is drawing from life. And museums are actually a really great way to get your students out. Right now is not, the best time to get a large group together to go take a field trip to a museum, but eventually we'll get right on back to that, or you can have them go with their families. And take a sketchbook and draw what they see. It gets them to pay attention to detail. It's also something that, as an art student, I did when I was getting my minor in fine arts. They had us go to museums, to art museums, to natural history museums, and even to the body world exhibits, because we were able to draw from life and draw what we were seeing. And when it comes to the body world, it's good that for life drawing, that is invaluable, because you're getting to see the muscular structure and the skeletal structure underneath. So it's something that artists do, and something that students can also do, to not only engage with what they're seeing in front of them just by looking at it, but also when you have to draw it, you have to take an even closer look at what you are seeing. And most museums, they love it when people will just sort of sit and sketch, see what you can see. And another avenue is to draw from life. And I saw in the chat that someone had mentioned that they already do this with their students, like have them bring in leaves or have them go out and draw actually from nature, in nature, at a national park, at a park in their neighborhood, in their backyard, all hosts of avenues here. And this image here of how to draw a leaf will be in the resources. I think she'll throw it in the chat. But leaves are not all the same. And when it comes to scientific illustration, you're not drawing your preconceived notion of what a leaf should look like. You're drawing what's there. And this process, you can have them grab a couple different leaves, or maybe different types of pine cones, different flowers. It gets them to pay attention to those details. And people, when they look out of the desert, they're like, oh my goodness, it's just brown, all the same plant. There are so many different species, and part of what we do with this process is to pick those those differences and getting them to hone in on those critical observation skills by taking a closer look at what they're seeing to depict what's actually there rather than what they think it should be. But on that note, you can also draw from your imagination as a part of scientific illustration, depending on what you're doing. So for the painting, that's where we get to have some artistic liberty and licenses, because no one really knows what dinosaurs would have looked like as far as what their colors were. So that's where Daniel and I got to play with what it should look like. And the museum staff absolutely loved the bright colors that we brought to the painting. But something that you guys can do, and we're going to do right now, are thought experiments of what comes to mind when you get a prompt. So we're going to do a little interactive activity. If everyone could grab a pencil or a pen and even a sticky note or a piece of paper, we're going to do a little interactive challenge here. I'll give everyone a moment to grab those things. Do we have any questions while we're giving people a moment to grab items?
No questions yet.
Okay, cool. But yeah, just like I got a prompt for the museum painting, this is a good way to get people thinking about how to visualize sometimes what can be abstract concepts when it comes to research, when it comes to data. And when we get that prompt, we have to think about, okay, how do we take that abstract concept, put it in a form that's visual, that's actually put down on paper, then you take it back to the researcher and you have the back and forth to make sure that it conveys what they want to convey. So what I'm going to do now is do a similar thing where I give you guys prompts and want you to just depict kind of what comes to your mind when you see those prompts. And another challenge on top of that challenge would be to try and condense that to a concise image, like a logo. Because when it comes to social media, sometimes less is more. If it's too elaborate, if there's too much, people just don't want to open it. They don't want to look at it. So there's a challenge between sharing all the applicable information, but also making sure that it's something that people want to engage with. So the first one, if everyone's ready, will be dinosaur, which we just went over. So it's a bit of a freebie. We also have beautiful illustrations by James Gurney on the screen. He was one of our big inspirations for how we painted and how he brings his dinosaur illustrations to life. And I'm probably going to get some Jurassic Park logos, but that's okay because pop culture, sometimes for better or worse, does influence how people approach some of these subjects. And sometimes it works for the better, where you can actually use those pop culture icons to get people excited about learning about real life data associated with it. And sometimes it's not great because then you have to deal with misconceptions about what these things actually look like. So we'll give another 20 seconds or more or so. Okay, next one. We're going to get increasingly more abstract here. So photosynthesis. What do you think of? Or how would you display visually photosynthesis? All right, 10 more seconds. All right, our next one, again, increasingly more abstract, global warming or climate change. And this one, can even be up to interpretation, because do you decide to depict what it is, or do you decide to depict it as the problem or solutions? So there is interpretation when it comes to that. And what's good about these thought experiments is that everyone has a different visualization that comes to mind, and you can see the differences when it comes to your students and what they think about. And oftentimes that's a product of everything they've been through up to that point. Right, 10 more seconds here. And finally, simply science, just science, as abstract as you can get. And as I was saying, when it comes to different students and their experiences, you can see what they're going to draw. And in the resources, there is a link to a similar thought experiment of just having your kids draw scientists. Like what would they draw? Would they draw a geologist? Would they draw a botanist? I would be thrilled if they drew a botanist. That would be awesome. Probably not the first thing they think of. And how many would draw themselves as a scientist, would draw female scientists? Just different things to think about. And people come from different backgrounds, and you have a diverse audience that you're trying to reach. So another 10 seconds here. And when we pan back out to everybody, I'll have you guys hold up your drawings if you want, because I'd love to see them. Okay, sweet. So our next item is just thinking outside the box when it comes to this. So line drawings and paintings, that's all scientific illustration in a more formal sense, but fine arts can also bridge that gap between scientific illustration or between art and science. And as I was talking about earlier, there are new processes like photography that are increasingly a part of scientific illustration. And there are some fine arts processes that are scientific processes that make them work. So right here, you can see two forms of alternative photography. It's a field, it's a lot of people do photography, but there's a lot of different forms of photography that can be really fun. You're seeing here is the chlorophyll process and the anthotype process. And this was part of what I did for my undergraduate thesis, where I was doing a science major, but I also wanted to combine my fine arts minor, and this is the result. So the chlorophyll process, for people that don't know, you can actually develop an image on the surface of a leaf. Have to have a broader leaf species, but you take a positive or a negative, you place it on the leaf, and if you set that out in the sun will actually bleach away at the pigments in the leaf itself, and it results in the image basically bleached into the leaf surface. And you can actually see here, this is it in the middle of the process, where you can see the shirt, you can see the shoes, the bottom of the pants, and even the water coming through on that leaf surface. It's a beautiful process. In the links, you'll have the information on how to try this yourself if you would like to with your students, and some examples of artists that have taken this to a whole other level. And on your right, you have a similar but slightly different process that also involves plants. the anthotype process. So this is where you can actually develop images on the surface of strained fruit pigment. So this is a strawberry anthotype. So crush strawberries, put it through a cheesecloth sieve, and you take that resulting pigment and you coat the paper, place a positive on top, place it in the sun, and the sunlight bleaches away the pigment, and you're left with the image that you see. The project that I did was based around the Los Angeles River and the environmental and social aspects of it. I'm originally from there, but I've lived out here 9 years now, but I have a deep fondness for the LA River and the environment that it hosts. So these processes and thinking outside of the box when it comes to scientific illustration might help students that are just like, I don't want to draw. I can't draw. I don't want to do it. There might be other ways to engage them and ways that might bring what they like to an artistic and creative process. So with that, to wrap up before we go to questions, like this is really about teaching and inspiring others in this day and age. Like more than ever, we need to communicate science in a way that reaches everyone, gets people engaged, makes them want to share it and talk about it. And to finish, as Einstein said, the greatest scientists are artists as well. So with that, I'll stop sharing here. And I would love to see some of your drawings if you want to hold them up before we go to questions. Oh man. Oh, we got some that are like straight logos. That's awesome. You guys, so great. Wow. Oh, nice dinosaur. Thank you so much. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. And again, something you can do with your students. Let me see. I'm going to check the chat. Chelsea, if you want to help me, if you grab any questions. But feel free to add questions, guys. So as we're going through this. Or any questions about the alternative processes as well. Oh, I like that someone did, or one child sketched hot pockets with cross sections of fruit. I love that. So I guess while we're waiting for more questions, one of the things I also want to stress is just that divide sometimes between science and art, and the misconception that, oh, if you're a scientist, you can't also have these creative outlets, or you can't do both. And that's just wholeheartedly just not true. I always tell people to engage all of your passions in a way that might, all your passions might not be able to combine together in a career necessarily, but possibly there is a way to do that, even if it's just something that's a side hustle. I do art commissions on the side, but also increasingly it's a part of what I do at DRI. I get grants to do scientific illustration specifically. All right, so I see a question. So with COVID, is there a way to virtually tour the Nevada State Museum? That is a good question. Possibly on their website, they might have more about that if they have visual tours. And I think they might even start opening up to people. They just might limit engagement. but you can also, even if you're not drawing from life, you can also draw from images from the museum as well. Like we used a lot of reference pictures that we drew from for the painting. And then, yep, Leonardo da Vinci, probably one of the best examples of a scientist and a researcher that was also an artist. And people wear his images on shirts, and it's a pop culture icon now. But that's scientific illustration in a nutshell. So, oh, and strain fruit is fascinating. We had a student ask, where does paint come from? Yeah, so a lot of the original pigments come from botanical sources or mineral sources. In fact, some of the original oil paints we don't even use anymore because they were so toxic. So we don't use some of those original, like true form pigments anymore. They found ways to achieve that color without having toxic chemicals and pigments involved. So yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah, Van Gogh licking paintbrushes, not advised. Not advised at all. Are you familiar with the art of soil Instagram account? Ooh, I'll have to check it out. And yeah, there are people that specialize in drawing or illustrating specific things. I just came across a body of work with someone had dug out the root systems of hundreds of plants and drew how those root systems were. So either the tap root, how wide, to scale. So you can compare the root systems of plant species in the Midwest. Huge undertaking, but so inspiring. I tend to focus on botanical, but then also whatever comes up in commissions, I find a way to do. Oh. Has this work done anything for your mental health or feeling of connection to nature? Absolutely. Art, and this is why another reason why I say, like, if you're a scientist, don't give up that creative outlet because it really does help. You don't have to pick one or another. It's still a part of you, and you don't have to diminish one. Just to make a career out of it. Oh, art is my my passion. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a Disney animator, and I never thought I'd be able to do science and combine it and still keep that artistic side, but here we are. Oh,
Probably have time for one more question.
Okay. Oh, I see the educational background, specifically crossing of science and art. So I had just gotten on that train, so wanted to be a Disney animator. That didn't work out because they shut down their animation studios. I had an excellent teacher who was an environmental studies teacher, and I didn't know that could be something you can do. I was like, well, I like science, but I'm not giving up my art. So I did a minor and took my first field job. And then I volunteered a lot with NDOW, with National Park Service, just to get a sense of the different work that they do. And I settled upon desert ecology as something that I really love. So I've never looked back after that point, but a lot of volunteer opportunities if people have time to get on out and work with scientists and see what they do in real life. Bird counts, mammal surveys, citizen science, and I put iNaturalist in the resources. Great way to engage with what's around you.
All right. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Your information, such inspiring work. And thank you to everyone who came today. All these resources, so the resource document from Tiffany, as well as a recorded version of this session, will be granted access to you. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys. And my contact info's on there. So if you have more questions, feel free to send them my way. Appreciate it.